never know if it could change your life. Take a chance, you're neither wrong or right. You never know if you don't roll them dice. You better roll them dice. You never know if it'll change your life.
Good evening, and welcome back to Blade Master of None, a Blades in the Dark podcast for Blade and Master, Blades in the Dark game masters.
Broadcasting live on the Hour of the Wolf, the Hour of Silk, and the Hour of the Spider every night here in lovely industrial haunted Duskfall.
That's right. You sit down with your favorite eel.
Yes. Have an eel pie.
Eel pie and mushroom loaf, and kick up your feet. Listen to, ignore the howls of ghosts outside your walls, and enjoy a little conversation about being a crew.
Hello, I'm Ira Glassworks, and welcome to Duskfall Public Radio, an Imperial Public Radio project, and it's this Duskfall Life.
This is, of course,
we love Blades in the Dark. We're talking more about it.
We love Blades in the Dark. Hope you like listening to us talk about it, because we're not going to stop. Well, we'll stop after today, but only briefly.
However, this is a generic episode.
Yes.
For people
this
who
should
play...
be of interest to everybody, because this is Dungeon Master of None, and it is for DMs and GMs of all sorts. I'm Rob.
I'm Matt, and yes, if you play any role-playing game, we're going to go through, if you haven't read it yet, the How to Play Blades in the Dark chapters of the Blades in the Dark book by John Harper, 2017, and pay specific attention to the how to play the game, how to run the game, and game master principles.
We talked last week about the game itself, and especially what the world building and the structure of it can teach DMs and GMs and players of all games, but we really want to dig into the actual precise GM advice section, the running the game section of the Blades in the Dark book, which is, I think we mentioned last time, one of the best we've ever read. It's really well designed, really thoughtful, really insightful advice for running both this game, but really all games. I think it's really, really instructive.
Yeah, and while it's like one of the best we've ever read, like nothing here is sprung really like whole cloth from this game. All of this, I think, builds on like really tried and true principles that have been around in tabletop gaming for not generations of people, but generations of games. Like right. I tried looking up like, oh, hey, where did John Harper get this idea? Because John Harper is kind of very upfront on like, oh, yeah, I took this idea from this game and this idea from this game. And I like followed one of them back, and it just led back to like Jonathan Tweet or something. Some guy who's, written a lot of games and written Dungeons and Dragons edition game. So
right.
Nothing's like new, or it's all revolutionary when you put it together, but it's all stuff seasoned game masters have been doing for a long time.
And a lot of times that advice has not been collated or written down or really well explicated. Even if it's not new advice, it's really excellent to have it written down in one place and have it outlined like this. John Harper has done a really good job of condensing it. That's, I think, there's a lot to love about this section, but it packs in a lot of really excellent advice in a really short chapter, and it's really excellent in terms of advice per page.
And here's I think a big difference between Blades in the Dark and a game like Dungeons and Dragons or really any other like popular game, even a game like Shadowrun or something like that, is while these games really in this chapter How to Play, John Harper tries to give you like, if this is the game you want, these are the ways you should try and role play and game master. Like, do these things and don't do these things. Yeah. And, there's no similar chapter in the player's handbook that's like, be heroic, help out your friends. There's no kind of guiding lights.
Play like a team.
Yeah. I'm guessing for some D&D players, this would be like an anathema. Like, well, you can't tell me how to play the fucking game.
Right.
Don't tell me that. And it's like, well, actually, telling you how to play the game is usually pretty good advice if you want to have fun playing the
I
game.
think that this is one of the strengths of Blades in the Dark. And even if you are not planning to run a heist-driven steampunk gothic horror adventure type game, thinking about what you want to include and how you want to create the feel and atmosphere of the game you do want to play is very important. And Blades in the Dark throughout the book, but especially in this section, does a really good job of that. And I think that's worth examining by itself. It points you in the direction of how to create the type of game that you want to play.
Yeah. And all you have to do if you want to play a different genre in like in a setting sense is kind of replace the word like scoundrel, right? For example, one of the advice for Blades in the Dark players is embrace the scoundrel's life with, I don't know, hero.
Embrace the hero's life, yeah.
If you're playing a vampire game,
embrace the pirate's life,
monster's life.
Yeah, exactly. just think about what
what pirate's
type
life
of,
for you. You can have it.
That's right. Well, let's just jump into it. This is really well articulated, so let's just go through each of these sections and talk about what's in it. And I think there's a ton to talk about. So, and I love this from the very, very beginning. It starts with GM goals, which, by the way, this is not necessarily intuitive, right? I think sometimes people, actually, I don't think that sometimes, I think that very often, especially D&D DMs, believe that their only role is to be neutral arbiter, is to be some sort of uninvolved referee mandating the rules, that they are not supposed to have any sort of goals or ambitions or, functions beyond just adjudicating the dungeon as it is run. And even if they're not explicitly thinking of it in those terms, I do think this is a common, and it's not like a mistake. It's not a thing that the players, I think, do because they want to do that. I think it's because that's how they're encouraged to think. But as a GM, as a DM, you should have goals. You should also, just as your players do, want to be driving towards something. And the goals that Harper has set out here are really, really good ones.
Yeah. And it's tough because this is a game, unlike D&D, where adjudicating roles is definitely never neutral, right? And D&D 5e and many other games expect there to be a kind of usually a binary outcome of things that should be solved in some kind of neutral way. But if you've ever sat around with your friends and played D&D for long enough, you will find that you come to situations where thankfully your game master, your dungeon master says, actually, well, the coolest outcome is this, right? I can see your intent. So this is what happens, right? So it's a lot of, some things we've talked about on this podcast before, being a fan of your players, right? Being a fan of their actions. And I don't know, looking for adventure and action.
Yeah. The three goals, the three explicit goals are...
Yeah, let's talk about the three goals.
Play to find out what happens, right? Don't steer the game towards certain outcomes or events. Be curious. This, I think, sometimes we have discussed railroading in great detail in other podcasts, and there are differing views on this, but I think this is a very good way. Frankly, I think this is the only right way to approach DMing. I know there's some disagreement on it, GMing, but I think just, be curious is such good advice about everything, but especially about gaming.
Yeah, it's like if you're looking for a place to be neutral, it's here, right? This is where you set your ego aside about like where your players are going to end up, right? If you know what's going to happen, then don't play a role-playing game. If you want to be curious about what's going to happen, play a role-playing game, right?
Right. And you can steer, but generally you should be curious. You should... Well, I'm contradicting the exact advice here. It says don't steer the game towards certain outcomes.
Don't steer.
You can influence, I guess. You can suggest, but let the players drive.
Yeah, here's what I think Rob is trying to say is, and other advice will back this up, is you put interesting things into the
Yes,
world.
right.
From weird demons and ghosts, or if you're playing D&D, cool dragons and magical artifacts and spells and ideas. But like, you know, leave your hand off the tiller and let your players decide which of those they're going towards.
Right. Well, and this plays directly into the next two pieces of advice, which are convey the fictional world honestly and bring Doskval to life, or in your case, Forgotten Realms, or whatever it might be, right? When it's time to say what happens or what's in the world around the PCs, look around. You know, say what you see. Don't play favorites. Make the world seem real, not contrived. Give each location a specific aspect. The examples here are really good. Crowded, cold, wet, dim, etc. Give each NPC a name, a detail, and a preferred method of problem solving, threats, bargaining, violence, charm, etc. This is great advice. This is difficult, by the way. You know, these goals, these rules are good ones, but this is the hardest part of DMing, of GMing, is holding all of this information in your mind, being able to describe it, you know, extemporaneously or off of your limited notes, being able to make those connections. This takes practice. This is the hardest part, in my opinion, of being a DM or a GM, but it is
right.
one
Unless
of
you're
the most
Laura
important parts.
Ingram Wilder and you grew up describing the prairies of South Dakota to your sister who was losing her eyesight, then yes, painting a vivid picture is tough.
It doesn't come naturally to you, right?
Or,
but,
you know, maybe it will. And if you got your MFA from Iowa State University, you know, maybe this is for you.
I like the suggestion of, you know, for NPCs especially, you know, a name, a detail, and a problem-solving method. You know, his name is Jim, he's got a scar, and he solves his problems with whining. He begs and grovels. You know, easy. Her name is Pat. She has a, you know, crooked nose, and she solves her problems with charm. She's a sweet talker. You know, his
name is Frank. He is picking his nails with a very long knife, and his method of problem solving is vague threats. You know,
right?
You just
this is, you know, we've given variations on this advice, but when it comes to locations and to NPCs, you really only need to start with a handful of things, and then if the players want to know more, you can build that out. But each individual data point, whether that's a scene, a place, an NPC, an action, you'd only need a couple of things until the players want to dig a little bit deeper. This is a great foundation to build from.
The great thing about this NPC three things advice is that this book here, which is, you should buy it just for this page because it's not an expensive book, and this page is awesome. On page 302, there's a table of people, but the table is, you roll a d6 for looks, which can be man, woman, ambiguous, concealed, or roll again. Then there's a bunch of descriptors, and then there's goals, and then there's preferred method of accomplishing those goals, right? Which, you know, commerce, hard work, violence, you know, preferred method, chaos. Get your little finger out there.
The tables are so good in this. They allow you to put together buildings, people, certain creatures, even scores, really, really easily. And the book correctly understands that you only need the outline to get started, right? And you can add detail as needed. But
to back up on these GM goals, right, is I think a really solid piece of advice hidden in the subtext of this page of Blades of the Dark, right? Which is that, like, your purpose in sitting down with your friends, like the job you have to do as a dungeon master, right? At the end of the day, it isn't to come up with the, like, coolest 3-act plot for your players or anything like that. It's to be there to find out what happens along with the players.
yes.
And to give them a vivid world, because they have no eyes, ears, or other senses other than you. And so if you keep those two things in mind, that we're trying to figure out what happens and they need to see the world through me, and I need to make that world a realistic world. If those are your two goals for every session, that is a good session, right? If
That
you
is a good
find
session.
out something else
Absolutely.
that happens and they have a vivid world, that's where people get fun from role-playing games.
And I love how this whole section builds, because at the end of the GM goals, it says to achieve your goals, use GM actions guided by your GM principles. So let's talk about what GM actions are. And I think that this is, once again, brilliant. This is, nothing here is probably going to be surprising, but the way that it is laid out, I think, is very, very helpful, even for expert and experienced GMs and DMs. I think it's just really, it really focuses you on what your role is and what you can accomplish during the game.
And again, 2 of these are maybe specific to the mechanics of this game, but in another sense, they're actually not. You'll see what I mean when we get into it.
Yes.
Okay. What's our first GM action?
Well, it's, of course, asking questions, Matt. And this is...
Is that really the first action?
It is on mine. What's it on yours?
Well, I don't know. I want to hear what you think about it. Sorry, I forgot. That's not a question. Sorry, I was just trying to ask questions.
Fuck.
Just being an annoying little fuck.
Matt got me real good. Matt got real good with his fucking dad jokes again.
Yeah, all right.
Yeah.
So asking questions, right? These can be establishing questions, provocative, or leading, right? This is your chance. If you're ever like, my players never tell me anything about their characters or what they're thinking or doing, it's often because we're just not asking them how their day was.
Everyone is always, asking why Ragnar attacks the goblin, but they're not asking how Ragnar feels. They want to know, They want to know how he attacks, but not how he feels about the attack.
Well, let me give you like one example of how well this works, but like how we knew this worked well, but we didn't like know is when I would like first learned how to dungeon master, like the only question I was ever told to like ask to the group or something was like, well, what's your marching order, right? And then there would be hopefully a not too long conversation about the various group strengths and weaknesses. And someone would always be like, well, I'm very good at spotting. I'm going to be in the back on the lookout. And I have a great relationship with our cleric, so I'm going to be right next to them in the marching. But that's the only question, maybe the first couple of years of DMing, that I ever put out to the group like that.
Right.
And what if we took that approach to more situations than just marching order in a dungeon or through the wilderness?
Well, and this is a great example because the book breaks down these questions into 5 types, right? There's exactly what Matt just described. Ask establishing questions, right? Like, who's leading the group? Are you all rushing in? Where are you standing on the street? What sort of things are you carrying? Do you want to talk to the Baron at the bar? Do you want to grab a drink first? This sort of thing. These are, that's an establishing question. We're all, I think, pretty good at that. But then there's some really, really, I love where it goes from here. And the next one is ask provocative questions. And the examples, I really like these. What kind of person does he think you are right now? Are you just going to let her get away with that? Can you bring yourself to hurt him? Now, what I love about these examples are these are examples that provoke role-playing, right? They are, what is your character thinking? How are they going to react to that? Are you going to just take this abuse, right? These are good questions that I think some of us know how to ask, but we're not always encouraged to because they're provocative. They can sometimes even be a little spicy. But I think these are getting in the habit of encouraging your players to get into their characters' heads and respond to what's going on is really excellent practice and something that you can do in any game.
Exactly. If you've ever felt like your their characters are just a generic combination of background, species, and class, that's probably fine because we're playing to find out what kind of character they are. But you put them in a specific situation, staring down the 2 hobgoblin generals in their war tent, and you ask them, well, what kind of person will the generals think you are right now?
Right.
And then we'll find out, are they a braggart? Are they, kind of a pleading whiner? Are they a diplomat? Well, in this situation, we'll find out. Of course, it can change in another situation, right? Give them that specific scenario. Ask them that question that they can answer, right? And then instead of you having to tell them what kind of character they are, right? And said, well, obviously this guy thinks you're a piece of shit, or, just ask them, like, how are they, what kind of person do they think you are right now?
Right. And yeah, this is you just ask them, you just killed a man, or, you just watched your fellow compatriot get knocked down and possibly killed by this monstrous enemy. Well, how do you respond? What are you feeling? What's going through your mind right now? These are easy questions to ask that I think, like, once you get in the habit of it, are great for you and your players. One of the things that I love about this game is that I'm an experienced GM, but I was not in the habit of asking these questions, and I've been doing it a lot more since starting to play Blades in the Dark. And my players responded well to it, and it's been really helpful for me. It's just, that's one of the ways in which, like we talked about last time, the type of play and the system itself encourages certain, like, out of game behaviors or meta behaviors. But it's not something that you have to play Blades in the Dark to learn. It was a really instructive way for me to get in the habit of it. So I think this is just like a tremendous example.
Absolutely. The next type of question is also just as good, which is to ask the players leading questions, right? To show them what you're thinking. Here's one of my favorite examples. When you do that, the whole thing is going to catch fire, though, right? We've all had players try and burn something.
Yeah, I'm like, so
and we're wondering,
that's going to set the whole building on fire, right? Is that what you're trying to do here? Yeah, yeah.
Or no, I'm not. And maybe they are. And if they are, though, that clarity has established.
Yes.
And we've avoided the nasty situation where you say, well, the entire building comes down, and then half of the players groan. They're like, that's not what we were trying to do.
This is a great example of what I was saying earlier. You can suggest and you can point them in the right direction without steering. And that's a great way of using these leading questions. Does anybody want to survey the room? Do you think that this is going to have a good impact on the Baron? Like, do you think that he's going to respond well to being called a stuffed up peacock? If so, is that what you want? Yeah, these sorts of things are really, really, they're good for clarification. They're good for teasing out additional information from your players, and they're good for just making sure that everybody is on the same page and knows what's happening.
The next is just asking trivial questions, and I think this is the nice seasoning, the nice pepper to throw in when you're, nothing's too crucial, and you want a little more color to a scene, right?
My players in this game have loved the opportunity to talk about how they are dressed, what they're carrying, what sort of implements they have on them. They've gotten a lot more into the visual and tactile elements of their characters, because I think they have a little bit of an easier time picturing it than they do standard D&D adventuring party. They have more touchstones for this type of setting. And so just asking them, what are you wearing? How are you dressed?
What's in your hands?
What's in your hands? Right. Is your character wearing makeup? Do they have a hat on? What sort of shoes are they wearing? Don't go overboard, but like just asking them little things about, especially as it becomes relevant, little trivial things. These are good things to cut the tension and just to, encourage your players to think about your players to think about the characters and what's going on around them.
The last example is to ask players for help. And John Harper gives us a lot of very specific Blades in the Dark scenario resolution things, which are usually often kind of negotiated. Like, hey, this seems like a level 3 threat. Doesn't everyone think? And then everyone has a chance to respond. But here's a great example of how I've done this in D&D. If the players are in some kind of combat encounter, you might ask them, who looks like the biggest threat right here? And, often the players will tell you, and they will be happy to tell you, because in fact, they built their barbarian to be big and scary. and they want them to take a hit. And so when you've denied them that or forgotten about that because you're juggling a million other things, then they feel sad. So, occasional, like a little bit of negotiation help with how you're going to adjudicate a situation or run an NPC is appreciated.
Yeah. You can also just like offload, like in this case, it's the rules of negotiations, but you can also offload rules to players in D&D. You can ask them, what's the whatever for whatever. I'm blanking on an actually useful rule at this point in time, but your players are going to know a lot of rules, and you can ask them to look it up or come up with it on their own if you are busy running.
What's the DC for how many minutes can you hold your breath
right
underwater?
How much damage do you take falling from 20 feet? I'm busy trying to figure out what the hell the hobgoblin wizard is going to do next turn. Yeah, that's an easy thing, and they'll be happy to help you with that.
I killed a player this week based on that roll. That's why I was looking.
Of how long they can hold their breath.
Yeah, I had this giant.
It's a really long time. It's actually an unreasonable amount of time, isn't it? Like
unreasonable amount of time. But I had this giant underwater cave complex in which some of the tunnels went out into the sea. You've done those where you have tunnels in the sea.
And so what
the
they decided
level.
to try to swim without knowing.
And I'm like, all right, you have no idea what's on the other end of this tunnel. The only people who have come out of this tunnel are fishmen who can breathe underwater. Are you sure you want to swim out there? Okay, yes. All right, you've reached, and then we looked up the rules. I'm like, you have reached half of your breath.
And then they,
if you
they
turn back,
they were like, I didn't save any for the swim back.
I didn't save any for the swim back.
Didn't save any for the swim back.
It only works in Gattaca and Blades in the Dark, but not in 5e. Because,
not in 5e.
God,
that's terrible.
Breath,
it's like a really long time. Isn't it like a minute per point of constitution or something like that? It's
it's something like that. It's a long time. It's anyway. You can hold your breath for 10 minutes. You're the best person in the world at holding your breath.
It's a preposterous amount of time.
Person.
All right.
But anyway, they died.
But yeah, it's a good thing to ask your players. It also helps them feel involved. It works better in some systems than others, but it's a good habit to get into. Okay. The next GM action is to provide opportunities and follow their lead. And again, this works a little bit better in Blades in the Dark, but I think this is great advice for any role-playing game. We talk about this all the time. Unless you're running a very specific module or what, and even then, give your players clues, drop NPCs in their path, give them hints, but let them decide where they're going to go, what they're going to pursue, and then follow their lead. Say, okay, how do you go about that? What do you do?
Right. In the next room after that player died, there was 10 potions of water breathing in case they wanted to explore the caverns, a map to where a ship was located, and of course a letter to an NPC in town, right? There were opportunities to explore 3 different things, and I was happy to see where they would go. Of course, everyone was still mourning.
Incredible.
Yeah. Here's the basic idea that John Harper, hits on, the idea that, you just put lots of information out there and follow your players' lead. I think one of the best pieces of advice here is give your players tons of opportunities to gather information. Give them some information for free and make their opportunities to explore whatever they want to know about something out. I mean, so often we're tempted to leave. Well, it's a mystery what that is. Well, then, of course, they're going to have a hard time making a decision, and they'll default back to, well, what do you want us to do? Right. If you don't tell them what's out there, they'll just ask you, well, what do you want us to do?
Yeah. And Blades in the Dark has a gather information phase built into the gameplay loop, but there's no reason why you cannot make that a more distinct and important part of any one of your games, and why you shouldn't, because it's a great idea. Before they go on any adventure or do any heist or go to meet anyone, if they want to say, okay, we're going to spend X amount of time gathering information, feel free to give them lots of time and different approaches to that information.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, I mean, one of the great things about Blades in the Dark we talked about is that it's a really tight gameplay loop. So like for players mechanically, what's out there is always like very obvious. It's some kind of target that has
Right.
a location and a situation. But like if you just kind of stretch those definitions a little bit, right? Everything in any game is a target with a location and some kind of situation. And what we're just asking you to come up with here is a couple descriptors, right?
Right.
Oh, it's a city state on the edge of the wilds. That is, what's the situation? Well, there's a civil war.
Right. And the plan is right. And the opportunity also includes a plan. So the plan might be we pose as dignitaries from a foreign state, or we ride up to the gates and announce ourselves as adventurers, or we throw our lot in with one of the factions. These are not things that you have to push your players into, but they are opportunities, right, that you can provide, right? And just because other games aren't structured quite like Blades in the Dark doesn't mean that they can't largely work the same way, right? Every sort of gameplay scenario is going to include in some way or another a target, a location, a situation, and a plan.
And one useful takeaway from this way of looking at things is I feel like often in 5e, when you have players gather information through, like, let's say, an Arcana skill check, you're just like, well, I'll just give them some more interesting facts about the target. But if you roll an Arcana skill check about, the Modrons of Mechanus, it could be more interesting facts, but it should be facts that link to other opportunities. Well, this gives you extra options for plans on how to approach this situation, right? More information that could be for a more subtle way to do things, or more an alternative way to do things, maybe better or worse than the kind of most obvious way to approach whatever situation is that they want to know about. Gather information. The better you roll, or the more you investigate, the more opportunities of approach players should have, is what I'm trying to say.
Exactly. Yes, give them additional, reward good information gathering with additional useful opportunities. That's the real sort of like core of this part of that gameplay loop. So the next piece of advice, or the next GM action, is pretty Blades in the Dark specific, but I think it's still very, very useful, and it's cut to the action. So in Blades in the Dark, we discussed this last time, when the players come up with that plan, you don't go through all the motions of, you go and you put your stuff together and you walk over to the house and now it happens, you're like, bam. You are breaking in to the cult headquarters to steal their reliquary. Go. And this is what I love about Blades in the Dark. That will not work quite as well for other games. However, I do think that generally cut to the action is extremely good advice. I tend to skip, for example, shopping, travel, other intermediary things in D&D. I know that a lot of players tend to like these elements, but I tend to want to compress them as much as possible so that the game is largely what is happening, right? Action is being moved forward. And even if what you're defining as action is conversation or some sort of other, like, less intense social element, still skipping over there's a reason why they tell you if you do go to one of those Iowa MFA programs, not to describe every single thing that your characters are doing. You don't say, John got up and walked to the door and turned the handle and opened it and closed the door and then walked outside and got into his car and turned the key and then he backed out into the street. No, John arrives at wherever he's going, right? Because you're trying to focus on what's important to the story, right? And in the same way, cutting to the action, whether it's in Blades in the Dark or Dungeons & Dragons, is a good principle to follow.
And if you were about to, log off in disgust and rate our podcast 1 star because, Rob said shopping trips are boring, If those are like action and character building scenes in your world, just make sure you cut to them like
Yeah.
as quickly as possible. Like if your players have a cool relationship with a merchant, right? And that's one of their NPCs. You cut to they're back to their office, right? And they're talking about whatever cool artifact that merchant has made for them. Cut to the scene you're trying to get to as quickly as possible. This is like one of those pieces of advice that basically solves like a good 20% of the questions that people ask us, like, oh, I don't feel like I get through enough in a session, or how do I make the most out of my limited schedule time? Well, make sure you're cutting to the important scene as quickly as you can, right?
Yes.
And make sure
if you
when
have
cut,
limited
like,
playtime, especially,
yes,
my strongly encourage you to jump to when something happens, whether that is shopping or conversation or dungeon crawling or whatever.
And if you're like, well, that takes away like some of like what the players would decide or something, just ask them. Like, we cut to the scene where you're talking to that merchant who's promised to make you the god-killing sword of angelic might. Where is that, right? Where is that meeting take place? Like, you tell me, right? You can get in on this cut too. The next piece is actually my favorite, which is telegraph trouble before it starts. So when action is underway, show them the threat that's about to hit, then ask them what they're going to do. Then it's easy for them to know what the consequences are, right? So often, players get frustrated at a game master because, it seemed like things came out of nowhere.
Yeah.
But for you, of course, it didn't, because you were watching the hidden, clockwork behind the scenes turning your world. You've got to telegraph that trouble before it strikes to your player, right?
I think this is a really good habit to get into, because Matt's absolutely right. Sometimes players will be like, well, hey, I didn't know they were going to attack. And the examples here are really good. So contrast these two things. So first, she snaps her coat open, stepping away from you, drawing her pistol. She's cocking back the hammer now in this slow motion moment, the muzzle leveling at your face. What do you do? Right? Excellent. Telegraphed, nobody's going to be surprised when she shoots. Compared to, she starts a fight. Do you skirmish with her? Right?
Now, in the first example, Rob is absolutely right. There's an opportunity for a player to say, whoa, we're all friends here, right? And I'm going to try a persuasion roll or something like that. I'm going to use a bardic, charm person ability, or I'm going to try and outdraw her and shoot her dead. Exactly. In the second one, there's no option for running away or doing anything else, because nothing's telegraphed to the players.
Exactly. I think this is, the owl bear rears up on its hind legs and bares its claws, and it's looking directly at you, Grognak, because you're in the front, and it's, pawing at the ground. It's going to charge any moment now. What do you do? Just, it can be anything. Don't, unless they're literally being ambushed, which will happen sometimes, let them know. The wizard is cackling, and his fingers are moving, and arcane energy is starting to accumulate between his hands. He's casting a spell. How do you react?
This also works, I think, on a couple different levels. On the level of ambush, did you provide any kind of telegraph that was possible in this moment? Like earlier, right? Did you telegraph that trouble was a possibility? If you didn't, your players might feel like it was just kind of out of nowhere. And then secondly, this can work on a macro story level. If you want a threat or an enemy or even an ally to seem cool or important or interesting, you telegraph that person, ally, enemy, threat, monster to the players before it shows up.
Yes. And this plays into the next GM action, which I think is really, because it's related directly to this one, and I think it's really important, which is follow through. And if you telegraph and follow through, your players will not be upset when bad or good things happen, right? They won't be bothered by consequences, which is important, because I think we've all experienced that moment when players are like, well, that's not fair. I didn't know that was going to happen. I didn't know that thing was going to attack me. I didn't know it was going to do that much damage. You can't avoid this forever, but as an example from that same scenario, Harper has, she shoots you, the ball shatters your cheek, and the room spins and goes dark, and you go sprawling to the floor, take level 3 harm. That sucks. That's bad.
Ooh.
But if it's described as she draws her gun on you, and then you fail to act appropriately to the situation, you can't really well be too upset when she then shoots you in the face, right? And this, I think, telegraphing as well as following through both makes the game seem fair and also reinforces that actions have consequences, which is another thing that sometimes players have difficulty with, right? You are like, well, okay, you charged into the meeting of nobles and you beat the crap out of Lord Fauntleroy, and now the guards want to bring you in for questioning. Like, what did you think was going to happen? But if you adequately telegraph and consistently follow through on these things,
everyone gasps in shock that you have a blade drawn in the holy courts.
Right.
Guards line the walls everywhere, cocking their crossbows. Then they're gonna know. I love this piece of advice mostly because it's also come from every little league softball and baseball coach. Like, listen, the most important piece of advice right here is follow through.
Follow through. It's good advice. It's good advice.
Follow
in
through
sports
is very important.
and in life. Yes. Golf, soccer, little league. Follow through. You gotta follow through.
Didn't have a good enough follow through there. I'm like, I don't know what follow through is, guys.
I know.
What am I trying to do? I'm just trying to hit the baseball.
I'm so bad at baseball. I was like, I don't know, man. I'm 6. I don't know what you mean. You're gonna have to be more specific.
You didn't have follow through, Rob.
Yeah, I did.
That's all.
I didn't follow through at the T-ball well enough, which is why they made me play left field. Yeah. So this is good basic advice. I think they're really like 2 pieces of the same advice: telegraph and then follow through. The next piece of advice, and this is really, really good, just general advice for any game, is initiate action with an NPC. Let your NPCs do the sort of provoke action, right? Use them to start a fight or push the players in a certain direction or provoke a response, that sort of thing. This is, again, maybe not obvious, but use your NPCs to drive the game. You've got them for a reason, and let them do a lot of the work here.
Yeah, I mean, one of the great examples here that I love is she's very smooth and sly. She tells you a lie about why she was late to the meeting, and it seems totally legit.
Another good piece of advice here is the more dangerous an NPC is, the more they should seize the initiative. I think this is really good advice. I think this is really good, is that you can be subtle about this, but I think that the more of a threat an NPC is to the players, or the more powerful they are in the context of the game, the more agency they should have, or the more agency they should exert, right? The more they should try to influence events because they're powerful, right? I think this is really good advice.
This builds on something that is pretty generic to Blades in the Dark, which is the NPCs just kind of have tiers, right?
Yeah.
That there's just tiers of effect for different NPCs. This is a tier 1, a tier 2, a tier 3 thing. But I think it's useful to think about NPCs like that in your own game. Even if it's separate from the challenge rating, you could have a challenge rating 6 Chimera, then maybe it doesn't have a lot of agency. So it's still kind of a tier 1. And when you've subdued it, you kind of just waits for you to do whatever it is you want to do with it. But, some schemer moving in the shadows is in fact tier 3 and is going to seize the initiative way, 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 way more often.
Yeah. The next few pieces of advice are good, but they are largely Blades in the Dark specific, so I'm just going to gloss over them, except for the last one, which is think off screen, which I like a lot. This is very useful for an ongoing game like Blades in the Dark, where there's a lot of meta game happening, but I think it's important in general, and it's what's going on elsewhere and how will it impact what's happening on screen or at the present moment. Who's working behind the scenes, who might have been affected by the commotion that they're making, who might have heard about the moves that they're making in whatever town they're in, and how is this going to impact further play?
Yeah, this is a good one. The other one I like from this kind of generic list is to tell them the consequences and ask. Yeah, you can run the whole way, but you might be exhausted when you arrive. Want to roll for it and take the risk, or go slower, right? Like, players should know when they're doing a consequence. I want to jump the chasm. Well, if you fail, you'll fall 40 feet. Do you want to roll for it? Like, tell them the consequences and ask, right? No one gets mad when they knowingly know the consequences. In fact, they enjoy the consequences when they fail. Just let them know the consequences, then ask them for their action.
If you telegraph follow through and make sure they know the consequences and ask, everyone should be pretty happy with the outcome, theoretically.
So those are your actions that should help you achieve the DM goals of playing to find out what happens and creating a living world. What are the principles that we should live by?
These are great. These are really good. And some of them are tailored to Blades in the Dark, but all of them can be adjusted to any game. The first and possibly the most important one, in my opinion, is be a fan of the PCs. And I don't think this needs to be said, but I do think that there is a history, especially in Dungeons and Dragons, of an assumed adversarial relationship between the DM and the players. And this is, I think, how it should be. You are trying to present the world honestly, but you're not their enemy, and you are interested in their characters and you're excited about their victories. You don't want to pull your punches. You don't want to put your thumb on the scale, but you want them to succeed. You want to give them all the opportunities you're going to give them as many opportunities as possible to do well and to thrive. This is just great advice.
Yeah, I mean, many games have this piece of advice, and these two sentences were at the beginning of the Dungeon Master's Guide or the Player's Handbook, I think everyone in D&D would have a much better time.
I think it's an important reminder that we all need. Yeah.
So the next piece of advice or next principle is let everything flow from the fiction. And this works really well in Blades in the Dark because everything's set up to snowball, to build off the actions and consequences of the player characters. Most D&D modules, or the way most Dungeon Masters write, I think are not set up this way, but I think it's a fun way to play a game. It really is, to let players shake things up and see what happens.
Mm-hmm. I think increasingly, even in D&D, even if you're running a module or writing your own homebrew, you can, try to point things in the right direction. But I think that as much as possible, it's great to let the players drive, let them set up the situation, and then let the characters react, see what happens, use the NPCs to, again, react realistically and accordingly. And you can achieve a lot of the same outcomes without, being so directly involved. Per our previous conversations about railroading, I think this is a great way to, if you are in the habit of needing to feel in control, is to sort of adjust your thinking along these lines and focus on how your NPCs react, how the worlds react, and try to emphasize that in your GMing instead.
I really like the next two principles. They're completely specific to Duskfall, but I'm just going to read them here. Paint the world with a haunted brush and surround them with industrial sprawl. Now, these hit on the two basic setting things of Duskfall, is that it's haunted and that's an industrial wasteland. Pick the two things in your campaign that you're trying to drive home as your themes, and write yourself little sentences and put them on sticky notes wherever your notes are, or on the back of your Dungeon Master screen. Just remind yourself, oh, hey, these are the two themes I'm trying to drive home.
Yeah, this is really good advice. You will have to adjust it for whatever setting you're in, but find out, what your two primary themes, or what the two most distinct aspects of the world are, and make sure that you're emphasizing those as often as possible. This is two things, right? It's just good advice to bear in mind when you're describing when you're running the game.
The next two pieces of advice, one, it's borrowed from Dungeon World, Apocalypse World, which is address the characters. And it's one we've talked about on the show before, that, you should forefront your characters, write down all the PC's names in a little note card in front of you so you can quickly remember who everyone is, put name cards in front of you. But then we're also given the equal advice, address the players, right? Which I think is really important, especially in certain situations, is to forefront what your players want out of the game, right? Sarah, how do you want to handle this scene?
Mm-hmm. This is such good advice, and we've mentioned the first part before. And this is, by the way, a GM cheat code. It's the easiest thing in the world to do, to get in the practice of, that will make your players feel more involved and you look like a great GM or DM, is just to address their characters when their character needs to make an action. But the second piece of advice, and the distinction that Harper makes between the two here, is so good. Sarah, when it's about the sort of like the meta game, are we going to do a whole scene here, or do you just want to like make a quick roll, right? Like that would be a good example for the shopping, right? Do you want to play out the whole shopping trip, or do you just want to buy your healing potions, right? Sam, do you want to talk to this guy, or do you just want to move on to the next thing? This is a really great distinction, and know when to talk to the characters and know when to address the characters and know when to address the players. These next two are specific to, this next one is largely specific to Blades in the Dark, but still good advice. Consider the risk. And this plays into what we were talking about with consequences and follow through previously, but think about the dangers inherent in what the players do. A risky roll is default. Call the positions as you see them, but be open to revision. Now, this is specific to the Blades in the Dark system, where risky or desperate or controlled are distinct mechanical situations, but also just bearing in mind the risk and making sure the players are alerted to that or aware of that is a good habit to get into in any TTRPG.
The other one, hold on lightly, is really nice, right? In which we're just kind of reminded, hey, it's not a no take backs game. You can rewind, you can revise. You don't have to be like, there's like, what's the principle? The like American baseball umpire principle. Like no matter how obviously wrong they are, they have to, like, on principle, to show they're above the players and coaches, argue back, right? You're not that kind of umpire.
So the last couple sections, and I like these a lot, are GM best practices and GM bad habits. So best practices are, this just sort of like brings together a lot of what we've already talked about, but earn the trust of the group by being a supportive and fair advocate of the integrity of the fiction. It's your job to portray a fictional world with integrity, not one that's contrived and set up for particular outcomes. When you advocate for something, your players know that you do so on behalf of this integrity, not to get your way or to arrange situations to your liking. If you've done all of those GM actions and stuck to the GM principles from the last couple sections, this will flow naturally. They will trust you. They will know that when you say something is a certain way, that you are doing so with a specific purpose in mind, and you are doing so fairly.
Absolutely. And that leads me to one of my other favorite best practices, which is don't block, right? I think this applies to D&D 5e, even though a large part of 5e is lists of blocks that are your job to say you can't do that. I think that's a bad thing to say. And, Blades in the Dark right here gives us the perfect opportunity. Instead of saying, no, you can't do that, ask them instead. You need to create an opportunity to attempt that, right? Or I guess in more generic terms, I think what does your character need in order for that to happen?
Right.
Or like, what do you need to get to?
Yeah. If it's impossible, what's an alternative? If it isn't impossible, how do we get you there? Right. But if you must say, no, you can't do that, say no, but try always to say yes and don't block if at ever possible.
Yeah. Be a fan of when your players say they want to do something, if it's something that obviously can't happen with the established fiction of the world, say, well, what needs to happen for that to happen, right? Because they don't know most of the time. They're not trying to cheat.
Right.
They're trying to have fun here. So instead of blocking, say, well, what do you need? And if they realize it's a very complicated scheme, then their mind's eye is drawn to the more simple straight line solution, or they get excited about that complicated scheme.
And this is related to another best practice, which is help the players use the game system. And this is a little bit easier in Blades in the Dark. Part of the problem with D&D is that you have to memorize like an obscene amount of rules if you're the DM, so you can't always know what your players might be doing. But it's a good practice to get into is if your player wants to do something and you know how they might go about it, tell them or suggest something. This is a good habit to get into. If there's a rule that would allow them to do what they're trying to do, a great way to not be a blocker is to say, yeah, you can do that by doing X.
Another, like, those two combined leads us to the best practice of keep the meta channel open, which is to like be really obvious and forthright about what is unsaid here.
Yes.
You didn't turn anything up, but a nature investigation roll, could be more fruitful. Or this NPC is cagey. Your persuasion check failed. She's holding something back.
Right. Yeah. You didn't see what you wanted to see, but maybe a medicine check would tell you more, or there's the markings you saw didn't tell you anything with your nature check, but a survival roll might be a little bit more instructive. Give them lots of opportunities to pick up on what they might be missing.
Another big one that I love is just put it on a card. My favorite tool is a 3x5 index card, which is just to write things down that can be magic items, a new NPC, a location, a thing players heard about, just so that they can have it there in front of them so they don't forget.
Yeah. Another one related, again, if you're following the actions and principles, these will all flow naturally. But another one that I have been using in my other games that I really like is play goal forward. And this can be as simple as, what are you trying to accomplish? This is a great question, by the way, that GMs are sometimes afraid to ask, but you can just ask, what are you trying to accomplish? And sometimes I ask this because I'm not actually sure. And sometimes I want to clarify.
Most of the time I'm not sure.
Sometimes my players are doing something really ridiculous and I'm like, what are you trying to do here? And sometimes they're just screwing around, and that's fine. But sometimes it's like, okay, what's the goal here? And this is a good question to ask because it's clarifying and it means that you don't waste time, but also it will give your players a chance to sort of fine tune what they're telling you. If they're coming with a plan and it's incomprehensible and you're like, okay, what are you trying to accomplish? This helps them focus on the goal. What are they trying to achieve?
Should we talk about some DM bad habits?
Yes, there's some really good ones here.
Oh man, these are so great. Okay, here's the first one, and I think it's pretty specific to Blades in the Dark, which is don't call for a specific action roll, which is to prompt players about what they're trying to do and to get them to describe what they're trying to accomplish, right? And it's a principle of this game that you shouldn't tell players, well, that's a tinker check or that's a command check, to let them tell you through their actions and then say, okay, well, I think this is a sway check. And then you have to go along with that. But I think it applies to 5e as well. Like, I think one of the most boring things you can do is say, everyone roll a perception check. Everyone roll a stealth check. Instead, you telegraph what's going on. There's some rustling in the bushes. What does everyone do, right? And if one player's like, I'm on the lookout, then that's fine. And if other players want to do other things, then maybe they're not rolling perception checks, right? If you say, you hear the clack of the sentries making the rounds again, they might spot you. What does everyone do? Well, then we can quickly go around and decide that, and you don't have to make everyone make a roll a stealth check, right? Don't call for a specific action roll. I really like it.
I think this is good advice. Wherever possible, let the players decide in any system, especially, obviously this works really well in Blaze in the Dark, but let the players decide how they're going to respond to a certain event.
Right. I mean, how much cooler is it when you say you hear the clack of a sentry's boots on the castle rampart wall and you can see the light of their lantern coming towards you? What does everyone do? And one player says, I blend into the shadows. And then that player, you roll a stealth check. The wizard casts invisibility on himself. Another player throws a rock somewhere and you get to make a deception check with the dexterity modifier instead of charisma or something. You finally get to, these are the opportunities where you finally get to use the alternative abilities, right?
Right.
This is way more interesting and allows for player creativity than everyone make a stealth check, everyone make a perception check, right? Try not to tell your players what type of action roll to make. Let them tell you.
Yeah. Another really good piece of advice here that I think applies to any game is don't make the PCs look incompetent, right?
Yes.
The example here is like when a PC rolls a 1 to 3, things go badly, but because circumstances are dangerous or troublesome, not because the character is a buffoon. I think this is a real bad habit that Dungeons & Dragons has, where if somebody rolls a 1, you're like, oh no, you fire your crossbow into your foot. And that's funny, I guess. But like I always hated this. This is why I hate critical fumbles as well, because one, it punishes marshals who roll attack rolls a lot more often. But it's just, you're a especially after a few levels, you're a highly trained, adventuring hero. You may miss, you may fuck up, but you're not going to do something dumb like hurl your sword across the room or something like that. So find a way to make the failure seem, reasonable and not, buffoonish.
Right. I think that just avoid the buffoonery, and like there's definitely especially in the D20 system, a tendency, because your players will fail so often, to turn everyone into incompetent, bumbling fools. And, that can be fun, but, it can be really frustrating especially when you, for example, at first or second, third, fourth level, you make a character like, I'm good at 2 things. I'm good at sneaking and picking locks. And guess what? You're still going to fail 40% of the time. It's like, well, in that character, if you try those actions a lot, if you have the wrong dungeon master, it can look like the biggest buffoon ever at stealthing and picking locks. And instead, you can make it a cool scenario of what are the circumstances that are challenging this, really exceptional hero, right? And then they look, more like Indiana Jones or any action movie star ever who constantly get into scrapes at things they're good at, not out of tripping over their own cloak or something like that, but terrible circumstances. And then it's really cool when they succeed later.
Yes, right. Exactly. Yeah, remember that it's no fun to like look like a goof, but also your players are professionals in most situations. And a professional athlete is going to play his entire career and not, maybe never do anything comically foolish. And yeah, it should be the same.
Rob,
for your
if I was a
players.
professional basketball player, I would just get so good at shooting free throws and 3-pointers, I would never miss. It doesn't seem like a hard thing to accomplish.
Right. How hard can it be?
Sorry, obscure ninja reference tweet from 2 years ago.
I would simply never miss a free kick. All right. There's also just, again, a lot of this builds off of what was said before. Don't let the planning get out of hand, and don't get caught up in minutia. This is exactly what we've been talking about before. You don't need to go over all the bits along the way. You can just, again, cut to the action, right? And we talked last time about planning, but find a way to move your players on to the next thing. Don't let the planning take over the whole session.
Any more do's and don'ts that we want to highlight? I have one more thing I want to mention really quickly.
Sure. I mean, there's a lot more to say, but I'm we've been going on for a while. There's a lot more to cover. So I think these are the highlights, but what else? What's the last thing that you wanted to talk about?
2 things, especially for dungeon masters building their own setting or world, that I think Blades in the Dark does that makes it really come alive, that you should do for your own campaign settings. And first is there's a great little template for two things: for factions, in which we tell what their two goals are and how difficult those goals are to accomplish. We describe the faction in one sentence. We give them a power rating. We list out some NPCs, quirks, allies, and enemies, and what their current situation is. And we should do this all in like a quarter of a page. So look at the factions as examples, and when you're building your factions, use these as a guide. And the other is like when you're building locations. These could be cities, neighborhoods, kingdoms, planets, whatever. They're so beautifully laid out. Like for Duskfall, John Harper gives them 4 traits: wealth, security, criminal influence, occult influence. Whatever the themes are for your game, give every place a rating like this. List out a couple notables, a couple details, and a couple interesting landmarks, and a description of what the average place in this looks like. And then if you give your players a giant map full of cities and forests and stuff like that, and you've written up this quarter page on each of them, no matter where they go, they will feel like they're in a world that you've completely written every story for. It's amazing. The way the templates for the factions and the neighborhoods in this game work are your guide for building your own world.
Yeah. Yes. Absolutely. 100% agreed. It's, you know, I know we all have too many books, but this is just like if you're interested in running a different game, but if you're just interested in GMing or game design, Blades in the Dark is really, really up there. It's really top notch. It's also not, it's not too long. It's very easy to read. A+, would buy again. Actually, I think I did buy it twice.
You bought the PDF and then the
PDF
hardback.
and the physical copy. So,
well, speaking of the physical copy, the other guide for like you as a dungeon master is the final like 5 pages of this are some tables, but they're a lot different than your average table in a D&D book or a Call of Cthulhu book. And they are absolutely perfect for building a world, right? I think it's like 7 pages of tables, and these are small pages. Help me understand Duskfall better than anything else. And if you're creating a setting of your own and you want to feel confident in this, take this exact same template and build the 7-page table for your own world, right? Where you have a list of 50 names and family names and aliases, and you can cut and paste the traits because those are like really generic, but you have all kinds of streets and buildings and features, and it is the perfect set of tables for describing this world. And if you use it as a template for whatever world you're set in, and you're like, I'm going to build these same type of tables for my world, you can let your players go anywhere. And then that fear of playing to find out will be gone, right? So if you were a little anxious at the first piece of advice that Rob and I gave you from this book, which is play to find out, build yourself something like this, and you won't be afraid to play to find out any longer.
I think that's a great place to leave it. You should really check it out for yourself. Once again, a lot of this, not all of it, is available, in SRD or online form at bladesofthedark.com, so you can see a lot of what we've been talking about the last 2 episodes. Check it out. Let us know what you think. Please do write us at dmofnone@gmail.com or add us on Twitter at dmofnone. And
that's right. And listen to find out, because yes,
that's right.
Listen to find out to our show, you'll find out.
That's right. All right. Thanks everybody for listening. As always, stay healthy, stay safe, and keep rolling them dice.
You better roll them dice. You never know if it could change your life. Take a chance, you're neither wrong or right. You never know if you don't roll them dice. You better roll them dice. You never know if it'll change your life. Take a chance, you're neither wrong or right. You never know if you don't roll.